tell the Chicago Teachers Union when it should conduct this vote, how it should conduct this vote, who should oversee this vote, how long this vote will be. State law does not prohibit us from taking a strike authorization vote now, and does not require us to wait for after fact-finding to do so. Last year, an Oregon-based anti-public schools pro-charter education led the charge to stifle collective bargaining rights for public school educators in Illinois. Stand for Children later bragged about the creation and eventual passage of the infamous Senate Bill 7, even implying they had coerced state lawmakers into supporting the legislation through campaign donations. It should be noted that Senate Bill 7 offered no education reforms. Its sole purpose was to make it harder for teachers' unions to strike. Ironically, since the signing of that law, we have seen a significant increase in the number of teacher strikes here in Illinois. That is because this bill emboldened school districts to enforce draconian policies on schools throughout the state. This illustration couldn't be more clear than in District 299, the city of Chicago. Since the passage of SB 7, public school educators, parents, and students in Chicago have been subjected to a variety of misguided and harmful school reform proposals. CPS administrators have openly bragged about how the district will starve a struggling neighborhood school for up to a decade before choking the life out of it and closing it down or turning it over to AUSL or other politically connected education groups. Thousands of parents, teachers, school nurses, students, counselors, clerks, ministers, activists took to the streets this winter to protest the board's plan to disrupt 17 community schools. Despite the scores of marches, demonstrations, board appearances, letters to the editor, and pleas of mercy from parents and grandparents of CPS students, the board acted with a cold callousness and voted unanimously against the will of the people. There is rampant chaos in Clark Street, which has become a revolving door of people with out-of-town license plates. At times, we don't know who's in charge over there. Jean-Claude Bizard is the third CEO I have personally interacted with in the past 2 years. In addition, there seems to be a pattern and practice of fraud at CPS. Yesterday, I asked CPS Inspector General James Sullivan and the U.S. Department of Education to investigate why Chief Talent Officer Alicia Winkler was able to proceed with a $35 million Teacher Incentive Fund federal grant without meeting the conditions of the proposal. Recently, the federal government asked CPS to return portions of those monies after learning CPS was in direct violation of the terms of the agreement. Before I turn this over to some of the educators, parents, and community leaders who are here today, let me go over some of our contract concerns. If the board has its way, it will eliminate any real enforcement of class size limits. In their proposal to CTU, CPS uses the same argument that Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney recently made in Philadelphia. The CPS proposal claims, contrary to common sense and teacher experience, that class size does not matter. Their language in quote says that the board shall establish a class size policy and notify the union of this policy. Not only will they impose whatever class size they think is appropriate after they have said class size doesn't matter, they have cut any funding in our contract to lower oversized classes and have eliminated any real limits on ballooning class sizes next year. They have rejected all of CTU's proposals on appropriate staffing levels for our students, including art, music, PE, library, and world languages. Counselors, social workers, nurses, and school psychologists, despite woefully inadequate staffing levels throughout the district, and a longer day that will require additional staff if it is to be a better day. They refuse to accept any of our recommendations regarding full-day kindergarten, playground facilities, or air conditioning for all schools, despite just last week many of our schools reaching temperatures well over 90 degrees when learning becomes nearly impossible and classroom conditions inhumane. They have already cut the facilities budget by 85% next year, and as they propose 60 new non-union charters and plan to close nearly 100 schools in the next year or so. They continue to disrespect teachers with a 2% raise offer for the first year of a 5-year contract, even though working at CPS is getting much, much more difficult. They plan to remove protections for experienced and qualified teachers who lose their positions through no fault of their own, which will exacerbate the current 50% teacher turnover rate every 5 years, something that interferes with continuity and quality instruction. These are the reasons why our members are outraged. We are the educational experts, and we have knowledge and insight about what's good for our students and appropriate for our schools, but they continue to refuse to listen. We cannot afford to allow the Board of Education to inform these harmful conditions on teachers, paraprofessionals, and students next year. And that is why our members have decided this is the proper course of action. First and foremost, it is critical that you hear from them this afternoon. We are the Chicago Teachers Union. These are the people who make the schools work and have important things to say about why we are taking this vote. Trish O'Shea,